We say good morning to Chris Putnam, CEO of the Dallas Express, joining us live on the Clarity Windows and Doors news line to talk about election results from the Texas primaries. Chris, good morning. Tell us about your biggest takeaway from this. Any shockers for you?
You know, there weren't so many shockers. It was a wild night. Certainly one of the wildest Texas primaries in my adult life. You know, I think on balance, it was a good night for conservatives, but, you know, there were a few surprises. The Crenshaw race, that was one, and there were a few runoffs that were expected that just flatly didn't materialize. The comptroller's race, the attorney general's race, those were won outright by former state senator Don Huffines and current state senator Mays Middleton. And almost everybody expected those races to go to runoff.
Did everyone expect the governor to win that? Looking online, and again, online is a completely different reality. There's a lot of shock.
Yeah, it's funny is a lot of us in the media joke about it and that are close to politics because we had the over-under on Doc Chambers set at 5%. Mm-hmm. I think he's at like 11. So he did about twice as well as most of us expected. It was the governor he's just got a huge bankroll, as you know, and he's been generally popular. So, he cruised. And of course, Lieutenant Governor Patrick had no trouble either.
When we're looking at the race between Paxton and Cornyn here, the Senate race, Cornyn's held that seat for a long time now. What has changed that has made him so unpopular? Well,
Senator Cornyn has frankly been unpopular with the right wing of the party, the conservatives in the party for some time. Mm-hmm. He's just been in cycles where he was very difficult to challenge or there wasn't a credible challenger. And frankly, in this case, last night, Paxton was expected to, and I was at his event, which was interesting because it was broken up by an Antifa type. It's crazy. But he was expected to, Paxton was supposed to be 5 to 10% ahead of Cornyn, and Cornyn ended up, I think, as we sit here right now, at about 0.6% ahead. But, that race was always going to a runoff. What's interesting now is what happens, right? Because Trump is the real X factor here. Mm-hmm. He didn't endorse Cornyn, which is highly unusual for a long-term incumbent, as you all well know. And look, he may need something, from Cornyn in terms of a vote here coming up before this May runoff. And so that's one of the factors everybody's watching, as well as the fact that, Paxton didn't have that much money, relatively speaking, compared to Senator Cornyn, who's just got a huge bankload of money, like $100 million, I believe, from various parties in that race on his side.
All right, Chris, let me jump back. You mentioned the attorney general race for the Republicans, Mays Middleton and Chip Roy. The last numbers I had, that's going to a runoff. Do you have different numbers?
No, you're right. You're correct. Late last night, it looked like it was not, and it's changed like just literally in the early hours of this morning.
Yeah, some of those numbers from last night were different this morning. I noticed that too, Chris. Well, let's talk about Talarico beating Crockett. Was that expected?
It depends on who you ask. We couldn't get a good line on this because the polling was all over the place. And in the end, Jasmine, it's so interesting because she is one of the best fundraisers in Congress. She has a national following, does a lot of national media, big, small donor network, and she just didn't raise a lot of money, relatively speaking, to what she's done historically for a statewide race. And Talarico did do a good job, on fundraising, and he was in the field a lot. So he was out there with the voters. It's almost like Jasmine was taking her name ID for granted and just didn't work as hard. And so there's been a lot of criticism of that campaign last night and this morning. The other interesting factor there was the whole thing with, Talarico and Colbert and, effectively this lie that they told, that somehow Trump and the FCC prevented his interview with Colbert from being platformed. He raised $2.5 million that weekend when that went national. And of course, that helped build his name ID as well. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the difference right now in this race.
It seems like that with President Trump in the mix, and obviously he is going to be this fall, that turnout is going to be the key to winning or losing, that if Republicans show up or Democrats show up, and Democrats, I can pretty well tell you, will show up to vote this fall, It's going to be all about turnout.
It is. And you make a very good point there, Ernie. And here's the thing, and this is just factual. This is a structurally challenging midterm for Republicans for a couple of reasons. One, the party that's not in power doesn't do well in this particular midterm cycle. The second issue, and this is the bigger one, and this is the one that Republicans nationally are all trying to solve, and that is when Trump is not on a ballot, there's a high percentage of Republicans that don't vote. And so that's the real key, is how does the party motivate these Trump voters who show up when, he's on the ballot to get to the polls when he's not. That is the biggest challenge they have.
Yeah. Chris Putnam, CEO of the Dallas Express. Chris, thanks for coming on. We sure appreciate it.
You bet. Y'all have a good day.